Welcome to the Deconstructing Data podcast and live stream. I'm Jessie Lezak, CMO at BDEX, along with BDEX's founder and CEO, David Finkelstein. What's new this week, David?
Hey, Jessie. All good. We launched some new product updates on twosegment.com and two-segment Shopify app. Now agencies can manage multiple accounts and get analytics on all your customers and download whole analytics reports in PDF format to share with your clients. So worth checking out. Anybody that's listening that's in the e-commerce or e-commerce marketing space, check it out.
Oh, that's awesome. Cool. Yeah, we'll keep us posted on two segment. Yeah, it's interesting to hear. And so I love that it's an agency platform now. That's also cool. Anyway, today on Deconstructing Data, we're excited to welcome on Mark Himmelsbach. He's CEO and co-founder at RYA. Mark, thanks for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Hi, Jessie. Hi, David.
Absolutely, Mark. Yeah, we're looking forward to this conversation. Thank you for joining us on the show today. And for our viewers and listeners who don't yet know you, why don't you introduce yourself, give a little background about yourself and what led you to build RYA and what you guys are doing.
Sure. So RYA has been around gone to market for about a year, but its foundation starts at an agency level. A co-founder and I started an ad agency 8 years ago. We call it episode 4 because it was our 4th time working together. So Teddy is my co-founder, and he and I worked at BBDO together, then IPG Media Brands and Ogilvy. So when we started an agency 8 years ago, we realized pretty quickly that two middle-aged dudes couldn't walk into a room with CMOs and say, trust us, this creative idea is cool. We had some credibility, but we didn't have ultimate credibility to get CMOs to buy bold, big, creative ideas. So what was any way that we could get them to buy cooler things? And so we started 8 years ago surveying Americans and asking them one pretty straightforward question. What would you do if you had free time or extra money? Because I don't know about you two, but if I gave you one wish, you would likely wish for more time in life to do stuff, or more money in life to do stuff. You couldn't wish for more wishes. That's against the rules. But so we started asking that because the thought there was that if we ask Americans broadly that question, they will tell us the answers will be where they're most aspirational, most optimistic. And that way brands can connect with them in those moments instead of interrupting them. But we also knew that just 8 years ago, as you know better than I, asking open-ended questions was really scary in the data world because there was not much to be done to parse that data. So we started asking that free time or extra money question across a handful of different metrics. One was 180 genres. So things you can listen to, play, watch, read, attend, 180 of those. I joke it's from action sports to Zydeco and everything in between. 20 different actions, so things you want to do with your free time or money. 30 demographic questions. That includes everything on the census, down to zip code, political preference, sexual preference, employment information, household income, and then we actually asked open-ended questions. What was the last thing you did and why did you like doing it? But it turns out we asked those questions. We surveyed 1,000 Americans a week starting 8 years ago. We still survey 1,000 Americans a week. And the answers to those questions gave us the data to be able to have brands take bigger, bolder leaps. So we were allowed to, we got permission from Charles Schwab to build a muscle car to give away at a PGA tournament every year, and still do. We've made cooking shows, we've made treasure hunts, we've made very unusual things because the data itself gives CMOs permission to take that leap. And so it turns out we kind of built a data company by happenstance. So two creative agency guys working with a handful of PhDs to make sure those surveys are aligned to the US population. But we all of a sudden, we realized we had about 9 billion data points about 2 years ago. And we were super selfish. We were only using it for ourselves. And we were like, well, what could we do with all that passion point data? It's novel, it's new, only we have it. If brands are being able to, are making creative decisions on top of it, Do you think they could subscribe to it? Do you think we could use it in different ways? So from there, RYA was born. And so we launched this data company. What was very happenstance in its creation is very intentional now. But we launched the company from that, and we've been going to market ever since. On top of that data, we've built a creative taxonomy and orchestrate a handful of LLMs to get AI to think laterally, to think creatively. And so RYA is a creative intelligence platform that shortcuts the creative process, gives audience insights and creative ideas, and brands subscribe to it and have been using it almost daily for the last year.
Wow. I love that story, especially given, my experience with data. I love the sort of track record you've created over the past 8 years
Thanks.
of just collecting this amazing data, and building what sounds like it to be a very strong proprietary data set, that I think you're just beginning to see the opportunity of how you'll be able to leverage that data set. And that's exciting, and makes me want to jump into that first topic, because the first topic talks directly to that, what proprietary data drives, why proprietary data drives advantages in the AI era, which is really interesting. It's so true. Like, I think a lot of people overlook and think right now, like, most of the AI that came out to start, and most of the AI that exists today is not proprietary data. It's just general data sets that are publicly available, and everybody's using that same data to try to do so many different things. But what's really interesting is when you start taking advantage of proprietary data sets. So I'd love to dig into this deeper with you.
Totally. And I very much agree with you. And I don't know if you've ever done this, but I really like to cook. So I've asked for the same recipe from 4 different LLMs, even say add weird ingredients or add unusual things, and I get the same answer. I mean, it's about 95% the same answer. So I think the proprietary data that you mentioned is really interesting. The domain expertise that we've applied on top of that data to make it useful for the use cases that our clients want is also really important. But all the LLMs regress to the mean. So our biggest challenge was, how do we get outputs that move away from the mean? How do we get unusual things? RYA stands for radical yet acceptable, RYA, because great creative ideas need to be both radical enough that they stand out, but acceptable enough that an audience will take them on. And so the proprietary data is essential to do that, because otherwise you just get generic AI slop. But I think the real secret to it is not only having the data, and we've had 8 years of data compounding every week, so we can have historical trends, etc. But is how to orchestrate and harness that data so it gives you answers that are actually useful. Because one of the things, as you know very, very well, is that you can have that data, but actually making it useful for an end user is kind of the behind the scenes secret sauce that takes a lot of work. So proprietary data is great, and we're super lucky that we have it. That's our moat, so to speak. But how we use it and how we make it usable has been much more of a challenge than I realized.
Yeah, absolutely. So help us educate people a little bit, because I think that, we talk about the sort of the generative AI that's out there today. Like I said, that it's all using sort of the same publicly available data. There's a lot of people out there that think they have valuable data sets, right? And they're, whatever it is that they're collecting, it has value, or they look back and they say, oh, I've been collecting data too. And they might be listening right now and saying, oh, I've been collecting data for 5 years. I wonder what I could do with that data. So let's help educate people a little bit. Like, this is really interesting, because you took this data set and then you had to figure out, okay, how are we going to apply this in a way that is going to add value to brands? So kind of walk me through that.
Totally. The hypothesis, so we collected all this data and we were using it we actually called it Madonna, hence the poster behind me. Turns out Madonna is litigious, and so we can't name it Madonna anymore. But the idea is that we set out with a hypothesis. So our thought was, there is so much identity data in the world. I know you are expert at that. talking about what people do, what they've spent, what they've clicked on. Our goal was to create a data set that gets to the why. So what would get someone to, what's the resonance data? What would get someone to buy? What would get someone to click? So understanding why they would be motivated to make the half of a brand. So when we thought about that as a hypothesis to start, that's where the data collection began, because we need a reason for being, we need a reason for that data to exist. And then it was really understanding through iterative testing. So we still test it hundreds of times a week, but we were testing tens of thousands of times with our data to understand if we use the data, can it tell us why an audience would resonate with an idea, why an audience would click, why an audience would buy. And so the data was only useful when we started really pushing and prodding. In full disclosure, we used to collect about 300 different genres, but we've, things like trap or, different types of hip hop, but we consolidated that all to hip hop and rap. So we actually collected more data than we actually end up using, because we found that a lot of the data, too much data, wasn't useful. So I think to your point, a lot of people have data, they think it's useful, but they don't take the step to test, to learn, to hypothesize what could be useful and what those results would be. And I think that you kind of only know how valuable your data is until you start working with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally understand that. So I'll sort of give a similar example in the sense that, like you said, we deal with a lot of identity data. We deal with a lot of data about people, not the why, but the about. But when we started digging into that with our newer product 2 segment, we were trying to understand, how can we help brands understand the sort of why are they purchasing a product, right? And who's purchasing that product? And one of the things, and how to communicate with them based on that, right? And one of the things we realized is that when we took all of the deep insights that we had about consumers, the demographics, the psychographics, the interests, and all that stuff, and we literally just had conversations with the AI to understand, what can we do with this data, and can we figure out how to apply this data in a way that helps us understand personality traits. And then we found that we were able to take this data about people and turn it into personality profiles. And I think we have 16 different personality profiles, from creative to pragmatic to analytical, whatever. And we were able to say, hey, that's really interesting. We can then take a consumer's enriched data about them and turn it into how to communicate with them, right?
Totally.
How should we communicate? We could communicate very differently with somebody that's analytical versus somebody that's creative, right? So we should be doing that, and so that's kind of what led us to build 2 segment the way we did it. And to me, that sounds a lot like the process that you went through in trying to understand the data set you have, but in your perspective, saying, okay, well, this is really interesting data, but how can we turn this into data that will help brands understand why people are making purchase? And so I think that's probably a really interesting insight for people listening today that think that they have data that might be useful. It's trying to figure out what is the goal of the data, and then how can you use that data to achieve that goal, right? It's not just
Totally.
Hey, I have this data asset, and how am I going to use it? It's very goal oriented. I guess we have to look at it from that perspective, right?
It is. It's very goal oriented, and then similarly, we always start with an audience, because any marketing needs to start with an audience, and we have nearly 200,000 survey respondents in this current iteration of RYA. We can build an audience as small as 120 people to still be statistically significant. And what we see with the brands that use it is understanding how to cut that data first. What is essential to build an audience, what is nice to have, and what needs to go to the cutting room floor. And then when you start comparing different audiences down to the fidelity of 120 people, you can really tease out the nuances. But sometimes we have brands say, they just really want to pinpoint the exact right audience. But sometimes that creates such a narrow band that you don't open the aperture for potential new customers or potential new users. And so I think not only hypothesizing with a goal in mind, but then being willing to have the flexibility of testing and learning to see, oh, what if we change that audience? What will they say? What if we increase the age, the household income? What if a different employment type or seniority? Then all of a sudden, those by using genres and actions, those passion points change. And brands need to be a bit flexible in their approach to the data to not over-engineer it so it is way too narrow and way too focused on who they currently have if they really want to expand who they're talking to.
Very interesting. Yeah. So it's wild.
Definitely.
And actually, maybe that helps us transition into the next topic, using data to inform creative and campaign strategy. I'd love to get your take on that.
Yeah, so our whole premise is that we originally set out to build RYA to be an agency accelerant, to get our agency from audience and brief through creative process to production faster. We still do that. It still feeds the agency for sure, but I think now brands use it for that reason, whether they work with us or not. So I think the whole goal is to go from zero to something in the world as quickly as possible. Because CMO regimes change, budgets change, quarterly priorities change. So if you can go in a day from nothing to something that you want to make in the world, that is essential. So the idea is that we can with our data predict which creative topics, which creative themes, even campaigns, activations, events will most resonate with an audience in seconds. And so we do that in two ways. One is as I said, we start with an audience. And RYA can generate those creative ideas on the fly based on a brief. But it also we built something called the RYA score. And what that is we've established 20 different proprietary data points to understand how to evaluate creative. And that is everything from, we've partnered with a neuroscientist who has a PhD in neuroscience of creativity to understand how the brain lights up when it's shown a creative idea. We've, of course, tested it with thousands and thousands of our own ideas, plus award-winning ideas. And then we've divined the idea of radical yet acceptable. So what idea is too radical or not radical enough? What idea is too boring or too acceptable? And that kind of proprietary combination of radical yet acceptable built into the RYA score is a way that we can predict whether a piece of creative will work almost in moments, long before you ever go into production or spend a dollar in putting it out in media. So I think the data built for purpose to understand how creative will work for a specific audience around a specific brief for a specific brand is a great use of our data because it can get you there without spending any budget.
Definitely.
That's amazing.
This might be a good time to just address our audience. I know earlier you'd said, and I put it on BDEX's YouTube page, that we should always start with the audience. And so I just want to acknowledge our viewers. We've got about 10 people coming and going on YouTube, about 5 on LinkedIn. And if those lurkers are here, we want them to join the conversation, leave some comments, questions, and we're putting them up on the screen. And just one question. As a certified data scientist myself, I'm curious how you structure a good, better, and best type of an experiment, Mark.
Oh, that's great. I think that is a great question. I think that the way that we do it best, and I am far from a data scientist, so shout out to a company called Southpaw Insights, who are a group of PhDs who help us with this. So always work with people who are smarter than you. Luckily, I've found those people. I think the way that we've set up the experiment is in two ways. One is it's a little bit of machine and a little bit of human. So whenever we come up with an audience insight, whenever we come up with a creative idea, we turn to the machines and have them test it. But then we turn to humans and have them consider if it's good or not. Marketing, we always say RYA is 80% good because there's that 20% of taste, craft, nuance that humans bring to the table is essential. We were with one of our client CMOs, and she's like, "Oh, that just feels like one of our competitor ideas." And so we were like, "What do you mean feels like?" She's like, "I can't really put my finger on it. It just doesn't feel like us." And we can have a debate whether a machine will ever be able to have the taste or judgment of a human. I think and hopefully not. But I think a good, better, best experiment includes the right combination of machines and humans in sequence, both inputting on one another and having the openness to consider both results can contribute meaningfully to the answer. What we find when we run into trouble is when we over rely on one and we do too few instances of testing. So if we kind of eat too much of our own dog food and think what RYA puts out is great, then all of a sudden we get in trouble because we are in a bubble and we don't consider what a machine thinks about it, but we also don't consider what other humans think about it. So our whole premise is that humans and machines work better together. So I think the best version of that is multiple iterations of machine and human working together to evaluate creativity based on the data.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
That's.
Do you have? Do you have a? I know I'm probably not supposed to do this, but do you have an answer to that one, either David or Jessie? I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think the most important piece of the puzzle that you said was sort of the human in the loop point of it. Like, you can't rely 100% on AI. It doesn't matter how well it's trained. You have to have that human in the loop, especially when you're talking about creative, right? And I think that's a perfect example. Like, only a human is going to know if the outcome or the creative itself is aligns with the brand, right?
Totally.
And so in that perspective, the client looked at it and said, I feel like it doesn't align with our brand, and they couldn't even explain why. And I find that really interesting, because that just gives you the difference between the perspective of a creative mind versus an AI.
Totally.
You can't do that. You're never going to get an AI that's going to come back and say, yeah, I don't really feel like this fits the brand, but I can't explain why. You know
Exactly.
what I mean? It's just never going to happen.
And the best human marketer. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that's the important piece of the puzzle, and I think that you hit the nail on the head with that. Like, you need that human in the loop because of that. There's just such a big difference.
Yeah, and the best human marketers, I think, have empathy to put them in other people's shoes. So you never market to yourself, really. So the human, it's essential for a human to do that, and a machine can actually help with that. An AI can actually say, have you considered this blind spot, or that audience wouldn't think that way. And then when you add bias, of course, when you add proprietary data, it actually backs up that idea and backs up that sentiment that the machine can provide. But yeah. I agree.
100%. I wouldn't disagree with anything. You have to have a human in the loop. And just try not to learn that mistake the hard way.
Yeah, exactly. Our machine overlords haven't taken over yet. So
yeah, they're going to hallucinate at some point. You have to have someone in there watching it.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely. And you say especially with creative, and I would say especially with numbers too. Like, it'll surprise you. At least with creative, we're just making pictures and telling stories.
Totally.
Balancing checkbooks.
Yeah, we're not saving lives here. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
I think back to like the Terminator movies, and there was never a time where the Terminator was like, this situation just doesn't feel right. You know what I mean?
Totally.
It's like either kill or don't kill. That's it. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. It's called singularity for a reason. So yeah,
yes,
totally
as confidently as possible.
Yeah.
They're always so confident. They're so right.
Totally.
Yep.
Such a good topic. I'm curious from the audience, what do you all think? We don't know you're here unless you comment, but I saw 10 on YouTube. I'm 6 on LinkedIn. What data are you using to inform your creative, or what questions do you have here, or comments? I love hearing other people's perspective on this. But we'll move on. Until then, measuring and predicting audience responses to campaigns. We love talking about measuring and predictions here on this show. Can you kick us off, Mark?
Sure. I think one of the best uses of AI is that it can give you that feedback loop based on what has worked to better inform predictions of what will work. But that is limiting in some ways, because again, back to if you want to attract new customers, new audiences, etc., you have to try new stuff. And so you have to think about where your audience is and where they're not. And if you understand where they are and where they're not, you can experiment, try new things, and that feedback loop becomes even more valuable if you can add a prediction layer on top of it. So I think that the idea of how we measure and how we predict what will work becomes much more nuanced and interesting when you want to be bold and try new stuff. And so I think sometimes the being slavish to the measurement leads you to kind of predictable, boring, potentially a downward spiral of results. So I think it's always an interesting combination. Watching clients is always an interesting combination to see how risky they want to be, how safe they want to be, and then the measurement and results usually play out from that.
I love that. And as you were speaking, we had a comment or a question come up and says, everyone says their data is proprietary now. This kind of gets back to our first topic. What's the actual test for whether a data advantage is real or just repackaged, Mark?
Oh, that's a good question. So the whether the data advantage is real is who owns and who has access to the data. So everyone says they have proprietary data, sure, but it's not only who has access to it, but how it's used. And I think that giving access to proprietary data means giving access to that data, but also giving people the use cases to be able to use that data. And so I think that I know we are the only people who have our data. Some of our clients actually add their data into ours. And so that combination becomes, I guess, even more proprietary to them. But the fact that it is ours and ours alone makes it proprietary. I would love to hear from Rick who else claims it that he thinks is false, is a false proprietary data set. But I think it's important to understand the provenance of the data and where it comes from, and is it really a standalone data set?
Yeah, I think there's two levels of thing when you think about proprietary data. Also, like, is it proprietary is one thing, but is it unique is another? Because everyone has proprietary data in the sense that, like, if they're collecting their customer data, it's proprietary, it's theirs, right? But what makes it unique? Is it unique? Is it something that nobody else has, or is difficult to find, or whatever? But
right.
Like in your case, this is a very specific data set that you collected, and it's very rare in that sense that unless there's other people that are out there that you don't know of that are collecting it, it's not like it's one, readily available, and two, not something that the average person or company is collecting.
Totally.
So I think that you have to kind of look at the two hand in hand. Proprietary is one thing, unique is another.
I agree. And from my BBDO days, one of the company mantras was have healthy paranoia. And we continue that mantra forward. I think we look every other day to see if another company has our data or similar. And a lot of people have different genre data, but not the breadth and depth. So I agree. The uniqueness is a really good point. Thanks for bringing that up.
Sure.
And I saw someone post for sure actionable is the other. Thanks, David. I think that, and this is a huge point about people who say they have a lot of data. If you don't make it available and actionable, not only to the data scientists, but to a general user, then it's the value isn't as high. I mean, the data always has value, but if random people can't use, if a user who has no data knowledge or no data expertise can't use it, if it's only locked in silos or only locked in areas of expertise, then it's not very helpful for the organization.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah, and
right.
David Wellborn added one other thing I saw flash up there, to saying that sometimes data is worth far more when combined with other data, making 2 + 2 = 5.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the places we're actively exploring. We just launched our API and MCP, and like understanding how our data fits with others. And I don't know if you encounter this, but how much to give up and how much to retain and how much to let people play and learn. Different clients want to understand the data in different ways. And sometimes I've learned that you have to let a little bit of it go for people to understand the shape of the data. I used to be like, no, you can't touch my data. This is our data. But you have to let people experiment and play and see how it all fits together.
Yeah, and that's absolutely true. I love hearing that you guys launched in an MCP server. We're doing the same with ours, because I think that gives people sort of the freedom to experiment with it in ways that would have been very difficult to do in the past, and now they can, because the MCP server can enable them to sort of have conversations with AI and sort of talk about how they might use the data, and combine it with other data sets and things like that. And there's so many things that you can do once you employ an MCP server to it, that it just opens up so many more possibilities. And to your point, giving them an opportunity to sort of play with it and test it, could open up all new opportunities, not just for them, but for you, as
Totally.
the data owner.
And we've added a context-aware chat agent to our data, so that is what makes RYA. And while doing demos, almost every demo, someone will say, "Can RYA do this?" And I'm like, "Well, let's just ask it."
Yeah.
And it's such a leap of faith in a live demo to see it, because I don't know what RYA is going to say. And so it's been really fascinating. It's like a change in my mentality that you just have to let the AI, let the LLMs do what they do best, and that is interpret data and spit out the answers that hopefully are surprising.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yep, so good. Well, before we end the show, we got to make sure we ask you about your tech stack, Mark. This is something we ask all the guests on Deconstructing Data. What are some of your favorite tools in your tech stack?
Well, I have to give a shout out to our Southpaw, but also our team at Station Sciences, who help us orchestrate all this data and technology together. I think the coolest thing that we've done recently is harness, I think it's now up to 8 different LLMs together, and we continually test which model does the thing best. So some have better context windows, some are more creative in the way they think, some are better at pulling audience insights. So the best parts of our tech stack, in my opinion, are the humans behind it. I know this might be cheesy, are the humans behind it and testing to understand which new LLM release from which different company performs best for which task. So we've been able to build our technology in such a way that when new models come out, we don't have to rebuild the whole tech stack. We can test our way into what works best. We build on Supabase, and so that's a great technology. But honestly, the tech stack that works best for us are the humans that are interpreting what is out there now, combining it with our proprietary data and making it really usable for our clients.
Nice. I love that.
Awesome.
Well,
yeah, thank you for sharing.
One last question. Yeah, definitely. It's covering up all of our faces here. What's your perspective on zero-party data? I think maybe for both of you, and derived data as zero-party data. In RYA's case, the concept of integrating customers' derived data back into the platform to create a continuous feedback loop.
That is something we are just building now. So the idea of, because we now have enough history with RYA, that we've seen ideas created from RYA put into the world. Now we're getting the results, and feeding that back creates a really interesting flywheel to test and learn whether RYA's predictions were right or not. And so that kind of feedback loop that we are integrating into our system has made the concepts better, made the audience insights better, and made the data set more valuable because it's self-learning. And I think that is a key, and we are just a small use case in terms of how the broader AI world is using it. But I think establishing those feedback loops, creating that training data so the machine gets smarter over time, is incredibly valuable and kind of where the future of, I think, AI and marketing will be. David, I'd love to hear your thought.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's exactly one of the things that we look at, is the feedback loop is so important in understanding in sort of any data situation, any data platform. The idea of having this feedback loop so that you can take a data set and say, yeah, I believe this to be like the most accurate data. Okay, and you can then put it out into the world and then use it, and you can get really good results, or you can get really bad results. It doesn't, you don't know what you're going to get. And when you get those results, only then do you really truly understand, was this a really good data set and why? And being able to sort of feed that back into the process and use that to learn, it's something that we do with ad campaigns and retargeting, using the AI that we use for audience building. And the idea that we can extend an audience and build this sort of expanded audience and put it out in the world, but then being able to see that these are the consumers from that audience that actually responded and engaged with the ad, and then feed that back into it, just enables us to improve the model further and
Totally.
continuously use that feedback loop. So that feedback loop is something that's really important. If you don't have access to that feedback loop, then you're sort of limiting the capability of what you've built, especially when it comes to AI, because AI has the power to be able to take that feedback and turn it into data that will improve, its output going forward. So
Totally agree, especially in creativity, I feel, because it's hard to put science to an art. And so that feedback loop just helps reinforce that.
Yeah.
100%. Yep, definitely. Well, there's appreciation that you say humans are the best tech stack, Mark, and yeah, I agree. But it has been a great episode. Thank you so much. Before we depart, though, would you like to let listeners know how they could reach you after the show?
Sure. Thanks very much for having me. It was awesome. I really enjoyed the conversation, and thanks for indulging my questions. Our website is www.askrya.com. You can ask any question and get a data-backed answer. So that's askrya.com. And you can email me at Mark, M-A-R-K, at askrya.com. So thanks again for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. We really appreciate you joining us here today. I think this has been a great conversation. I love what you've built. I love your proprietary and unique data set, and how you've put it to use is amazing. So congratulations to you, and thanks again for joining us today. Thanks
very much.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Mark. And for everyone else, we'll be back next week. And I'll see you backstage. Mark, I'm going to close out with a
So audience members, we want to invite you to get powered by BDEX. Build authentic connections with your audience and drive unprecedented engagement. So just imagine harnessing the power of AI to craft your audiences that truly resonate with your brand, ensuring that your marketing is hitting the mark every time. We want to bring you closer to those marketing goals, and we're eager to guide you. So just visit BDEX.com. You can click on the Talk to an Expert button and get powered by BDEX. Deconstructing Data is the show that makes data make sense. Every Thursday, David Finkelstein and myself, Jessie Lezak, sit down with industry experts to unpack how data really drives marketing. We do this in plain language anyone can understand. If you want real insights, real conversations, and zero jargon, tune into Deconstructing Data live on LinkedIn every Thursday at 4:15 p.m. Eastern Time. Yo.